So earlier on, the Deputy President Paul Mashatile calling on everyone to collectively bear equal responsibility to put an end to gender-based violence in the country. He was speaking during the launch of the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign in Kabokweni in Mpumalanga. Mashatile says those who violate the rights of women and children should not be given forgiveness without the application of proper punishment. Lebogang Motau is founder and CEO of Free World Initiative and joins us now to talk about the launch of this campaign. A very good evening to Lebogang, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So as we mentioned, this is a global campaign based at the UN through UN Women, and I was just looking at the stats. They say as of today 736 million women have been subjected to some kind of sexual or physical violence by an intimate partner. So that's 1 in 3. South Africa has been called the rape capital of the world. Just how bad are the figures here?
They are really bad. Good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for having us. As FWI, there is a bit of a backlog. I'm not sure if it's just on my side, but FWI has been working towards eradicating violence against women and children and marginalized groups. And the statistics that we see, we always need to be aware of the fact that not everyone is reporting. So even that 1 in 3 is just a margin of what is actually happening. And also remembering the fact that so many of these people who go and they report their cases because of the experience they have with police stations and police officers, they often withdraw it all because of their partner themselves who has intimidated or coerced them into removing the cases. 82% of rapes are done by people that are known to the victim, and it is about a mile away from the home. So stranger danger no longer applies. And South Africa, unfortunately, is the 5th unsafest place for a woman to live. So it is scary times for us as women and for children as well, because they also carry the brunt of what is happening in terms of the world of gender-based violence.
And I wonder if when we reflect on these figures, particularly we talk about the violence, the physical and sexual violence, is there any consideration of the emotional and mental violence being inflicted not only on women but children as well?
I feel that, we keep highlighting rape statistics, we keep highlighting physical because it's the easiest one to report. But now when we talk about psychological, emotional, financial, religious abuse, it becomes a bit more difficult for us as victims to convince, and I have to say convince because the onus has always been on the victim to prove that they are actually being violated. So something that doesn't have a physical appearance becomes more harder to report. But not only, as I said earlier, we've got police officers who keep turning back victims who report, but not only police officers, we are also within the workplace, within the spaces that we are all in. We have a country that has so often swept under the rug things that are happening. We as victims report, but it feels like we're just reporting to increased numbers, including men and women who are in power, who are perpetrators, and nothing is being done to them. So it just feels that all of this is a campaign method that is being used by government to make us smile and seem as if something is going to be done. But on the ground, nothing is being done. And then there is not enough psychological and social support towards victims who have reported or who have experienced this type of misconduct towards them.
So the theme this year is in investing in measures to fight gender-based violence and femicide, and listening to the Vice President speaking about the question of whether the punishment meets or fits the crime. So if we're talking about investment, we have made, according to what President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced over the past 2-3 years, made investments in holding conferences, in strengthening the laws, but have they been qualitative investments?
Unfortunately, like all other things, our constitution, everything on paper is very beautiful, but it is not filtering down to the places that it's needed. We are still walking into police stations that do not have victim empowerment room, that do not have rooms for a private for victims to be able to speak in private. That has not happened. We are having situations where the sensitization of both police officers as well as healthcare officials to deal with victims has not been put in place. We have not had the vetting of people who are working in sensitive that perpetrators are not in positions of power. We are not having, there isn't enough that is being happening to make sure that victims are taken care of. There's not enough shelter. The fact that we still expect women to leave her place of comfort instead of the man being the perpetrator being jailed, for us is a huge issue. The fact that so many jails are so full. And I think the most important one is the fact that the psychological aspect of things is not being taken care of. We are seeing that abuse is happening at such an early age. Therefore, we should be investing at healing these children at a young age so that they themselves do not become perpetrators. I think it's not going into the correct places. We are making sure that we do not have victims. South Africa's curative nation, we should be looking at preventative and making sure more funds and more energy is going into ensuring that perpetrators are not in this and perpetrators are healed so that they are not repeat offenders, because it has shown that most perpetrators are violating. More work needs to be done with the psychology and the root causes of violence instead of the end result of trying to empower victims. Let us reduce number of victims. Let us eliminate victims, and let us make sure that there are no more abuse happening here.
The president speaking about a need for positive masculinity. We saw the pleas and the cries of the community of Lesukisiki, where the lack of recreational activities was bemoaned for the reason why there's a high incidence of drugs and therefore sexual and physical violence against particularly vulnerable communities, the elderly, children and women. So I'm just wondering, if we're saying this is such a pernicious thing in our society, is there any hope that we can change behaviors? And is the lack of deliberate investments in socio-economic circumstances to blame, or are we such a violent society that it's become commonplace that when one is bored, or one needs money for drugs, that this is where we turn to the vulnerable communities?
That is such a deep and interesting question. As FWI, we just had what we call it Dr. Master, was our second one, where we are trying to look at the psychology of men, of the mental health of men, because studies have shown that men manifest depression in a different way than women do, and men will become aggressive. So yes, we need a lot of attention in terms of what is going on with men, how we can help them heal and recover from past traumas. There is studies that are showing about epidemiology that a lot of us are already born with our DNA changed due to the trauma that our parents have faced. So that's another area that is attention. But there is, yes, we do come from a history of violence. We cannot forget that has not been healed, and hurt people do hurt people. But there are systems that are in place that are something as simple as this load shedding, we work a lot in Olifants, and the members of Olifant were saying that they are terrified to go out of the house when they lights out, because it is so scary out there. So there are a lot of things that need to be put in place. The fact that we do need to heal as a nation, the fact that we do need to put in place to ensure that we are safe, the fact that the police officers need to be trained make sure they're not turning back people who are in and reporting and telling them that it's a private matter and speak about it. But the core root of it is how are we raising our children, both feminine and masculine, so that we can have positive, both feminine and masculine. Because as much as we talk about gender-based violence, and the bulk of it is felt by women, gender-based means something is feminine, so men are also experiencing it.
Lebogang, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Lebogang Motau speaking about the launch of 16 Days of Activism against no violence against women and children.